With me now, Policy Director for the Conservative Partnership Institute, Rachel Bovard. Rachel, good to see you.
Thanks for having me.
All right, Rachel, let's start with the who. Why would Twitter decline to disclose who will be deciding or what standards will be used to decide if a tweet is misleading or contains contested information?
Well, because they don't want to be held accountable for it. They want to be able to pick and choose which information they deem correct and the information they want you to see. And they don't want you to have any say over how they're going to do it. And we know it'll include organizations just like the World Health Organization, because YouTube has already said if a YouTube video violates the safety standards put out by the World Health Organization or information contained by the World Health Organization, they will remove it. I assume Twitter is following the same path, which, to your point, is absurd, given how misleading and inaccurate half of the statements from the World Health Organization have been.
Right. If they're the authoritative source, then Twitter is just going to be a smoldering pot of fake news because of the WHO. Rachel, how is this going to impact dissent or criticism or opinion about political policy? Because there's a perfectly valid argument among the top epidemiologists in the world, not just political punditry, about whether lockdowns work, whether they're effective, whether they're smart, or whether they don't work, whether they cause more deaths, whether they cause more harm because of the economic devastation. How is this new Twitter guidelines or these new Twitter rules, how will it affect that?
It's going to have a huge impact on it because, look, the answer to misinformation or dealing with problems is more speech, not less. Things like this get meted out in public forums. You have robust debate and dialogue, and you come to certain answers. You contest things with other information, but that's not what Twitter wants. They want one version of the truth, and that's their truth. They're not interested in anyone having a debate. Remember, Twitter also said it's going to take down tweets that violate public health recommendations from states. So they are now acting as an arm of the government in some respects in determining what's safe and what's not. And again, these aren't state laws that are being violated. These are just public health recommendations and guidelines. So what we're really seeing is an unprecedented attempt to control speech, control the narrative, but also a really disturbing commingling of state and private power in unprecedented ways.
Right. And when you talk about that, I think it's really important to note that Twitter didn't do this of their own volition. There were state and local government officials who asked Twitter to censor on their behalf, and Twitter was just like, okay, and they went ahead and did it. So this wasn't just their interests aligned. This was active collusion between the government and big tech to silence people who dared to criticize the government.
Yeah, and what I think is really concerning about this is, obviously you now have governments using state actors to crush speech that the government would otherwise have a duty to protect. They can use private companies as a way of getting around people's First Amendment rights that the government is supposed to protect. And so, again, we're in unprecedented territory here. This is a lot of transparency and oversight are needed right now because we are really wandering into dangerous big brother territory, and nobody seems particularly concerned about it in Congress.
No, and I hate to make a pessimistic prediction, but my guess is that the majority of these fact checks or markers or censorship, whatever you want to call it, is going to be aimed at conservatives or critics of government policy. It's not going to target actual misinformation like the World Health Organization tweet saying there is no human-to-human transmission, or the World Health Organization saying asymptomatic people, they're not carriers, don't worry about that. Or Neil Ferguson, saying 2 million people are going to die, or any of the other models that have been absolutely wrong start to finish. None of that information is going to be marked as contested. But truly, I cannot think of any prediction, any piece of information, any piece of data that isn't contested, that isn't under debate in this crisis.
That's the point of scientific debate, is to have the debate. So that's what needs to be going on, and Twitter's making sure it doesn't happen. And I think to put a little bow on all of this is the fact that the World Health Organization's tweet from January 14th that says, hey, coronavirus, it's not contagious. Last I checked, still up, not flagged, perfectly available for everyone to see. No problem there for Twitter.
Yeah, it's truly awful that the World Health Organization wouldn't have taken that down on their own. But of course, we know they act as the mouthpiece of the Chinese Communist government. So now I guess Twitter is doing their legwork as well for the Chinese Communists. It's terrible to see as much as I love Twitter. Rachel, thank you for being on the show. I appreciate it.